In 1821, Massachusetts General Hospital opened the doors to its first building. Throughout its nearly 200 years, the hospital's approach to building facilities was fundamentally unchanged. Advancements in medicine dictated architectural design to aid in the delivery of health care. The Bulfinch Building was designed to house facilities for clinical care, research, and education. It included specialized, sophisticated space and controls for light, heat, and ventilation. And the location next to the Charles River Basin would provide the best access to a growing population.
So if you think about why this building was built on 4 acres of what was formerly Prince's pasture, and right next to the water, it was all about access. The location of the hospital was, from its very, very first planning stages, all about access to the facility, which is still a challenge and a goal of ours.
Population increase led to growth in demand, so new wings were added to provide more beds, new nursing quarters, and crucially, a new service building. For the next half-century, MGH focused on conquering pain and infection, with discoveries gathered in the Spanish-American War, the Civil War, and World War I. At the time, gangrene and other surgical infections were thought to come from miasma, or bad air arising from marshes, poor drainage, or contaminated buildings. Field doctors noted that soldiers were less prone to infection when they were housed in small, isolated units. At MGH, this observation led to the construction of the pavilion wards, which were meant to be torn down after 10 years when they were presumed to be permeated with disease. Eventually, the introduction of germ theory forestalled the need to tear down buildings. However, the idea of quickly built wards with corridors for distribution of infrastructure and services remained as a solution for the demands of growth. Medicine and surgery advanced in the late 19th century to the point where many diagnostic and treatment procedures could no longer be accomplished in the patient's home. In the early 20th century, MGH created national models for housing new patient populations, the wealthy and the middle class. The Phillips House was a hospital for those who could pay for treatment, and specialty amenities were provided. The Baker Building was built to provide care for patients of moderate income by increasing efficiency and reducing cost of care by focusing on operational and financial structures. The footprint of the MGH campus on 10 acres of land would create a new challenge for expanding the hospital. But in the 20th century, with the feasibility of multi-story buildings, it allowed for vertical expansion. In 1939, the White Building provided an approach to rationalizing and consolidating hospital operations and support services across the campus and allowed for the development of a new urban presence. At the time, it would be the tallest building in Boston, and it was made possible due to the new invention of the elevator.
It wasn't until vertical transportation in the form of elevators, core steel construction, etc., could be developed that it was even possible to go up. Frankly, I think it was because we were landlocked. So if you look at the 10 acres on which this main campus sits, it's been the same 10 acres forever. Of course, we have taken down and replaced some buildings, which is harder and harder to do as they're more connected.
The largest complex that the hospital would take on for that time began in the 1960s with construction of the Gray, Bigelow, and Jackson Building and Towers. By the time the building was completed and occupied in 1968, it was one of the largest building complexes at the hospital to date. The 23-story Ellison Tower opened in 1991, and the 14-story Blake Building opened in 1994, replacing the antiquated Baker Memorial Building and eliminating its 4-patient-to-a-room model with a more medically appropriate single or double patient room scenario. Phillips House moved to the top floors of Ellison. The roof of the Blake was built to accommodate helicopters that would deliver trauma patients straight to the emergency department. As the need for cancer services grew, so did the necessity for having a building dedicated to the treatment of cancer patients. In 1968, construction began on the Cox Cancer Center. Both the tumor clinic and the radiation therapy departments were relocated to the building. In 2001, proton therapy moved to its own clinical building on the MGH campus. Up to that point, it had been administered by MGH radiation oncologists since the early 60s at the Harvard Cyclotron in Cambridge. In 1982, the Wang Ambulatory Care Center replaced the 1903 Clinics building, which had been the hospital's first outpatient care facility. The Yawkey Center for Outpatient Care opened its doors to patients in 2004. The 320,000 square foot facility boasts 10 floors of space for patients in a number of clinical care programs, including cancer, cardiovascular, pediatric, musculoskeletal, and women's health. On the 8th floor is the Healing Garden, an oasis of respite for all MGH patients and visitors.
As a physician, it is my firm belief in what I say all the time, that it's not about the buildings, it's about what the buildings do, what they enable the humans and the technology to provide for our missions.
With that goal in mind, today the new Lunder Building honors this legacy and offers the next generation of advanced patient care. This 14-floor, 530,000 square foot facility houses 28 procedure operating rooms, along with expanding services in cancer, neurology, radiation oncology, and emergency care. Specialized rooms, called hybrid operating rooms, offer the next generation of personalized surgical care. Space is designed so that technology comes to the patient rather than moving the patient to technology.
The lessons of history are that clinical care should drive what you do with buildings. The second lesson from history is that clinical care will transform faster than any building will ever do, and that you need to think that through. And the third is that we get everything we can out of a building before we take it down. So you want to make sure that you invest appropriately in the design, in the construction, in the materials, so that it's, that it doesn't become obsolete.